Hello, and welcome to this edition of Secure Networks, the Endace Packet Forensic Files, with your host, Michael Morris. This episode's very special guest is Andrew Cook, CTO of Recon Infosec, and former Air Force captain and cybersecurity incident response investigator. Andrew, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, awesome, Michael. Thanks for having me. So, yeah, like you said, I got my start in the Air Force as a cyberspace operations officer. I came in at a cool time where they dropped a bunch of lieutenants into a cube and said, "We need you to develop a new paradigm for defensive cybersecurity operations." And we said, "What is that?" And they said, "You do threat hunting." And we said, "What is that? And can you use it in a sentence?" So with those clues, a really savvy group of folks came up with what is proactive, engagement-based, mission-informed sort of defensive approach to cybersecurity that also got sort of bundled into what was being heralded as the nation's first defensive cyber weapon system, the CVH weapon system, the Interceptor. I think we'll talk about that in a few different times, because rolled into that, relevant to network analysis and packet capture and things like that, was the deployed interceptor platform, right? The flyaway kit, right, with the network telemetry and all those things. I know Endace is into flyaway kits. But yeah, so all of that informed my approach to incident response, security operations, and the things I do at Recon, which is finding some bad guys, right? So we're committed to the art and science of security operations. We think really hard about all the things we need to do every single day to protect our customers, 24/7 monitoring, threat intelligence, incident response, threat hunting, running a SOC. I saw you guys had Matt Bromley on almost a year ago, just over a year ago. Yeah, a good friend of Recon, worked with him before. I wish I got to coin this phrase, but he says what we do is give bad guys headaches. And that's exactly it. So every day we're thinking about how are we giving bad guys headaches.
Oh, yeah. I love Matt. He's super smart, first of all, and just a great expert on sharing how to better secure networks. So, yeah, he was a wonderful guest on our show. And first of all, thank you for your service. Certainly appreciate what you've done for the country, and you've got an exciting background in history with your skills. And so you're a great fit for what we like to do on this podcast, which is really just kind of share your insights in best practices that our listeners can learn from. So kind of let's get started with what's one of the most significant lessons you've learned from handling major cybersecurity incidents, and how has it changed your approach to investigations?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there's a whole lot of technical answers that I could give, but I want to take a different tact, which is people. So I don't think that, when you're going through the labs and you're working through how to do packet capture and memory analysis and log analysis, doing all those things, getting smart, nothing really prepares you for the people part of cybersecurity incidents, which is there are real businesses on the other side of these things with real people that are concerned for their jobs, that are concerned about the impact, that this is not routine for them, right? This could be your 150th ransomware incident, but this is their first. So there was a really quick sort of moment working my first incidents where I realized there's a lot of people handling here, where you need to be sort of what I say, the steely-eyed missile man. They really are relying on your confidence, your tone, your assessment, right? Speaking clearly, and navigating kind of just with empathy what they're going through. And the trust that they're putting in you for helping them through this event. Even if it's routine for you, it's not for them. And the other piece of incident response on again, that sort of goes unnoticed is that is significant is the victims, not just like the IT people on the other side of this, but like that poor user that clicked the phishing link, that poor user, whose name is in the report. And that, that person just wanted to work one day and basically got mugged. And now, the whole company is in turmoil because they clicked the link or sent a wire or whatever they did. So, one of my first reports that I was writing, my boss said, you can't blame the user here, right? Like, like step backwards a little bit. Don't say this is Beth, right? Their account did this, right? So anyway, I think there's an approach to people that people don't think about too much on the incident response side. That's
No,
really
that's
important.
great insights. I mean, you're right. I've talked to numerous CISOs, and they don't get into that piece of it, right? It's more about some of the impact. I mean, basically, people are experiencing fundamentally a crime, right? And it's like any other significant, somewhat traumatic crime out there. It definitely has an impact. So that's very unique insights. So can you walk
100%.
us through your typical incident response workflow or activity, and what steps do you consider most critical for ensuring a successful or as best as possible outcome?
Yeah. So when I approach an incident response, there's the NIST answers, right? There's the identify, contain, eradicate, recover. Everybody can go through that. But what does it look like in real life? So my sort of step zero is to always make sure I understand from the organization that I'm helping, what are their priorities? What are their concerns? What are their goals in this response? What are their biggest questions? What is the current impact? Like, what's going to actually help? From there, you kind of blend in their perspective and their priorities with your view of an experience on assessing the threat. What is the continued risk? What could the bad guys be doing? What are your concerns in terms of root cause, lateral movement, persistence? And with those two things combined, developing an investigative plan. So it doesn't have to be super formal, this investigative plan, but what it should help you do is what I'm always doing is making sure that I'm answering the next most important question. So you don't want to get pulled into rabbit holes. You don't want to be pulled into technical details that may or may not matter at this moment or move the needle in response. You want to look at all those priorities. You want to look at all the questions that you have. You want to look at where you might get those answers. And then you want to think about, okay, if I get the answers to this next most important question, how does that translate in terms of action, recommendations, remediation? If I'm not able to answer this question, how does that influence what I'm recommending next in terms of maybe taking more drastic action because we don't have a good understanding of certain risks because there's certain gaps in how we understand that question. So again, always go in with what's the next most important question, and always ask yourself, am I really asking an important question right now, or really answering an important question right now?
That's tremendous insights. And on your webcast last week, when I was on, you mentioned kind of beginning with that end in mind, and trying to understand the outcome. So so makes sense as it comes with the incident, right?
Yeah. So a lot of that mindset, I'll give a plug. Chris Sanders has a great course, the investigative mindset or the investigator's mindset. It really did solidify some of the thinking that I had about how to approach incident response, timeline analysis, developing a timeline. But that investigator's mindset is really what I go in with. The beginning with an end in mind, and I might be jumping ahead because I'm going to go into security operations here, but beginning with the end in mind is my approach to security operations. So security operations being those things that we do day in and day out to find bad guys before they can do harm, network monitoring, alerting, detections, all those. But beginning with the end in mind means taking that incident response experience and saying, when I'm in those incidents, what are my most important questions? What are my most important telemetry sources, my most important witness devices? What are all the things that I want out there in the environment that would have answered those questions because they were important? And working backwards to say, okay, well, now I have an opportunity today to make sure that that environment is instrumented and ready for an incident, right?
No,
thinking about what does that incident look like? Well, now I have the opportunity today to build detections around what that incident would look like. Right. So again, a lot of places I think go into approaching security operations with, hey, what can I buy? What are all the lists of things I need to be looking for and monitoring? And they sort of just wind up with a pile of things that they don't know what to do with, and then start going from there. I say, what are you really trying to do? Find and stop bad guys quickly, and what do you need working backwards. Put yourself in the incident shoes and learn those lessons proactively. Yeah.
No, that makes perfect sense. So along that line, taking that a step further, are there specific tools or platforms that have proven most effective for you in conducting incident response and deep dive investigations? And why do you suggest or prefer those over others? Because you're right, a lot of organizations have kind of a menagerie of things, and they're not sure how they all work together, and there's not necessarily common workflows, right? So where's your head on most effective tools in your toolkit?
Yeah. So when I do incident response, it kind of comes in one of two situations. One is I'm rappelling into an environment that this is new, right? I'm day one with this customer, with this environment. We don't know what's available in terms of telemetry, logging, platforms, SIEM, all those EDR, all those things, which means I've gotten pretty handy at making the most of a kind of toolkit that works for all situations and being able to work with kind of, a thumb drive and open source tools, assuming that I have access to nothing else. So in that toolkit, you've got Sift Workstation. I'm sure that's come up, but Sift Workstation being kind of like the blue team Swiss Army knife virtual operating system, kind of like the counter to Kali on the attacker side. You've got the Sift Workstation, which builds in all of those nifty tools for you to do memory analysis, packet analysis, log analysis. Learn how to use the tools in Sift Workstation, and you can kind of go into any situation, volatility, things like that. The other tool that I point people to, we use it. We're good friends with Cohen and the folks that they got pulled into Rapid7, but you've got Velociraptor.
Oh, okay.
Open source, ready to go. That's what you can deploy during an incident. Again, if you have nothing else and you're starting from scratch, Velociraptor is going to be one of those options to rapidly deploy to endpoints and be able to start interrogating them, pulling forensic triage images and things like that. You've also got TimeSketch. So I would look into TimeSketch. I talk about the importance of developing a timeline, but getting all of that data, all of your events into a timeline, something like TimeSketch can import all of that forensic data. So yeah, that's my toolkit for when I don't have my my rocket ship here at Recon, right, where we've got all the SIEM and logs and EDR and perfect telemetry, perfect captures of that's my dive in toolkit to start a knife fight on in a new environment.
That's good tips. It's like an emergency kit, right? What does somebody start with in that kind of situation? So you mentioned packet data, and you mentioned a number of other things. Do you ever, or how do you ever, leverage packet data with other telemetry sources like endpoint logs, SIM alerts, SIM logs, threat intel feeds? How do you do that to build a complete picture of an incident? And I liked your comment about the timeline as well, right? Because order of things happening matter, right? To trace back threat actors' activities. So how do you tie all that together?
So, man, I can go on a whole timeline rant. A lot of that is going to be parroting some of Chris Sanders' really deep thinking on this, but always be timelining. As you narrow the gaps in your timeline, as your timeline is sort of reinforced, is how you know how believable and plausible your story matches reality, right? Always be timelining. But on the packet data specifically, I'll share a few anecdotes that I think maybe prove the point. But one of my first exposures to packet data was in those Air Force stories. We'd have the endpoint team; they'd be inferring a lot of what might have happened. They know it was malicious. They'd be looking at an implant. There'd be malware on the machine. And they could start saying, and this thing is capable of command and control. This thing is capable of keylogging. This thing is capable. But they couldn't say necessarily with certainty what actually happened besides the fact that the malware ran. And we talked about the flyaway kits that I was talking about. That did have packet capture. And you walk over to that guy in the network analysis team, and he basically dropped the transcript. Here's everything that happened on the wire. Here, you talking about command and control generally? No, here's what they did. Here's the typo they made. Essentially, what I was looking at was the Metasploit, right, console logs going back and forth across the network. So there's a lot in that packet data that can be a treasure trove. The situations that I run into on data exfiltration, there's always a moment in ransomware cases, particularly, where there's a risk of exfiltration, and that exfiltration, the answer, did the data leave, has implications. It has implications that generally need answers to lawyers, and lawyers need some certainty.
Right.
And you can't give them that certainty, and they have to make risk-informed decisions, because we can say all indications are they had the intent, they had the access, they were on the machine. I could even tell you that they collected these files and zipped them up and put them on this hard drive. And I can tell you, that they made connections to the outside world, but I can't tell you exactly if and when they left the network, right? Like, there's always degrees. And even if you could tell that whole story, eventually there's no camera between that critical moment of did the data actually leave, right? And so when I do go into an environment that does have the packet capture that can actually show, no, this is what went across the wire, it's 100%, it got through. Now you have certainty, right? So there's just some questions you can't answer without packet capture. The more data you have, the better your answers are. The better your answers are, the more clarity you can have around your assessments of recommendations and next steps, and whether or not they need to send disclosures, and who they need to contact for regulators, right?
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
No, you hit on it. Actually, you kind of preempted my next question, which was give an example of where packet data provides insights logs can, and you nailed it on that data exfiltration. So I'll kind of jump ahead a little bit then on how do you prioritize or categorize different types of security incidents. You mentioned ransomware, and I know you've got many other examples, but how do you categorize different types of security incidents to allocate appropriate resources and focus to the right areas and respond effectively?
So in my spot where I sit, I don't really get to prioritize, right? I am where my customers need me. I might be able to triage inbound calls, but I don't have the luxury of prioritizing, right? If it's important to the people I'm working with, then it's important to me. What I will say is maybe on the categories, what I'll turn that into is there are a few trends and buckets of incidents that we've been working lately.
Okay.
The least likely but most highest impact, and the one everyone's concerned about, is ransomware, an actual network breach, code execution on the machines, the lateral movement, kind of the classic. So that's less likely, but highest impact. That's the one that has everybody really, really scared. Lately, what's been causing those network breaches, and the ones that we're seeing, two varieties. Your VPN is not a security appliance. It's a front door. FortiGate vulnerabilities, Cisco vulnerabilities this year, they've all been exploited. It's an issue. Stay on top of your FortiGates. Your VPNs, but lately today included your FortiGates.
Okay.
So they're coming right through the front door. MFA on your VPN, we need that. It used to be, I was talking about RDP. Hopefully that's done, but that's where those are starting. More interestingly, on the ransomware, how are they compromising computers lately for network breaches is ClickFix. These are users. Yeah, so look up ClickFix. This is really creative. We warned about it late last year, and it
Okay.
continued all the way through 2025, and they've only got more creative. So this is users are getting social engineered through malicious websites that they wind up for a variety of reasons, including ads, phishing links, all those kind of things. But they're fake CAPTCHAs, right? Hey, validate that you're human. It looks just like a Cloudflare pop-up. It looks just like a Microsoft prompt. But what it's having users do is, what I need you to do is validate that you're human by pressing Windows key R, pasting what's in your clipboard real quick into that screen and pressing enter. And what is that? It's PowerShell, it's MSHTA, it's code execution.
Okay.
And they've even gotten later last year, later 2025, what we were seeing are blue screens, fake blue screen messages. And to resolve this issue, Windows key R, Windows key V, right? Paste this into your console, and they've just injected bad PowerShell. So that's one class of incidents that we're seeing, actual network breaches and compromise. More likely that we're seeing a lot of is identity compromises lately. I think ransomware has gotten harder. Bad guys are just looking for the quickest way to make money. So business email compromise, cloud identity compromises. So this is generally through phishing. They give up their credentials. There's an attacker in the middle, which if you look at, it's egregious what's going on there. There's no purpose behind MFA, it seems, when you can just proxy the connection and Microsoft can't do anything to stop it. We've got some experiments out there. But either way, your users are inputting their passwords and their MFAs into fake login screens, getting their cloud accounts compromised. And from there, we see things like wire fraud, right? Where they'll sit there in conversations, watching for conversations in email, looking for opportunities to swap an invoice, change wiring instructions, with a legitimate account. And if they didn't land on somebody that looks useful for moving money, then they use that account to spread to more users, right? So they'll just send their malicious message out from that trusted mailbox to all their friends and move laterally. So that's a lot of what we're seeing. There's some more clever and creative ones, but that's been a lot of the ones lately is on there.
That's great for people to know, right? It's what's the most common things going on right now. And I've heard from some of our other customers and partners that the whole user credential thing is I've heard of that one before, spoofing some of that stuff. So you mentioned it earlier, and I want to kind of dig into it a little bit more. How does your incident response experience and this in-depth knowledge that you have on some of the most common threat vectors and approaches lately, how does it influence your approach to security operations, and what advice do you have for security operations teams based on that?
So I'd say start small, right? When you're getting into security operations, there's a temptation to really overcomplicate things from the beginning. I'm in a wonderful position right now where we've got really good workflows, all the tools we need, all the process improvements, all the things, but that wasn't born kind of whole cloth. What it started as is, what's the next most important question to be able to answer? How do we start answering that question more quickly? How do we start answering that question automatically? And those questions are answered in the form of detections, right?
Right.
So, if I was to start from scratch or share our approach to security operations to give you a head start, being able to design things as code. So think about the process of security operations ahead of time. Don't neglect how something like tuning is going to happen, right? How does a detection get tuned? Those little workflow problems are going to nip you in the bud when they're inefficient. Where do our detections come from, and how are they prioritized? Are we just accepting from our vendor this priority, this severity, this risk rating, whatever they're saying? Is that what we're using? Do we have another layer here that can adjust priorities? Start with automation in mind from the beginning, right? Across the whole security operations workflow, right? From the detection to how it's triaged to how those triage, like what is the logic of that triage step. Anyway, there's a lot that goes into security operations, and I'm going to make it sound overwhelming. But kind of like an incident, what's the next most important thing to get right? Start getting that right. And before you know it, you've got a giant machine running 24/7. Just what's the next most important question? What's the next most important problem to being efficient and effective, and iterate from there.
But I like what you started with. Start small, right? Don't try and, what's the saying? You don't eat an elephant the whole thing at a time, one bite at a time, type of thing.
Keep it focused on the threat, right? Keep it focused on the next most important thing that I'm concerned about is evidence of X or Y or this threat actor, and use that as your use case to go get good at that, right? Make that really efficient, right? You can build these small use cases based on realistic threats into efficient workflows and processes, and before you know it, you've got all your bases covered.
Right. No, that's great insights. So a little plug for you. We chatted last week on your weekly webcast, the Thursday Defensive, from Recon Infosec. You brought up the importance in that conversation. You brought up the importance of threat hunting. Can you expand on that? Because I don't know that a lot of organizations have invested in full-time threat hunting, right? So can you highlight why that's so important?
Yeah. So the joke here is, how much time do you have? Because this is really my bread and butter, right? And I sort of herald the importance of keeping the meaning of threat hunting alive and what it really is. So first of all, what is threat hunting? It's an approach, it's a mindset, it's a little bit of a philosophy, it's an analogy. I'll give you the quick version. Threat hunting is any proactive effort to discover threat actors in your environment that have bypassed all your other defenses. So they're already in your environment. What does that mean? That presumes that you have this assumed breach mindset, which means that just because an alert isn't happening today doesn't mean I'm not breached. So you've got to sit with this uncomfortable tension of, what does it mean for me to be breached right now? And from there, you need to get smart, because you need to start developing hypotheses. What could I have missed? What is a realistic threat? What is the most concerning gap in my telemetry or in my environment? What is my biggest concern? So you take that, you be proactive about, okay, what do I have available to me right now to start answering questions to discover whether or not this happened. This encourages you to be proactive.
Right.
That proactive takes the form of looking through your environment to see if you can find evidence of that bad thing that you just hypothesized about. Discovering whether or not you have the tools, skills, ability, telemetry to even answer that question. Writing down the gaps on what you're missing so you can recommend improvements because you just discovered a blind spot. That really important threat, we have no way of even knowing that it happened, so we're in a bind. Validating your existing detections. Do I have detections for this? Would they have fired? Do they look correct? So this keeps you proactive. I say that word a lot, proactive. And it also keeps you continually improving, right? Because the worst thing for security operations is either complacency or sort of unfounded confidence.
Right.
Or you're so overwhelmed being reactive that you don't have any time to be proactive. Yeah. And so that's why for me, threat hunting is the evidence of threat hunting, the outputs of threat hunting, the activity of threat hunting is the highest indicator of a high-performing security operations team. Because that means that those folks have time. It means that they have the ability to keep pace with the threat. It means that they're keeping with the latest in threat intelligence. They're thinking about their environment, and they have a process for continuous improvement. If they can't threat hunt, then they're overwhelmed, or they don't have the tools and tech and process that they need.
I think that's a great recommendation on a mind shift for people, mindset shift, to really kind of keep that proactive nature. Along that lines, are there some emerging trends or technologies in digital forensics and incident response threat hunting? And I know those aren't all the same, that professionals in this field should be aware of and adopting? Yeah.
So we're most excited about, and man, I'm going to be the guy that has to bring up AI, right? But there really is something happening here around AI-assisted workflows. So what I'm most proud of with the work that I've done here at Recon Infosec around security operations is we were always pushing the envelope of what we could do with automations and SOAR and efficient workflows, but there was a limit to what was possible with traditional playbooks and scripts and things like that. So building AI into our workflows has actually been startling in some cases. The ability to take detection logic and the event that fired and validate that that detection sort of makes sense, that the selection logic is correct. And AI can actually do that 2 or 3 years ago. This clearly misfired, right? This detection is not meant to find this thing. There was never anything that could kind of reverse an assertion of whatever the technology was telling it, right? Like a computer reversing itself and being like, it looks like this is a mistake was never possible. So that was one of our first surprises 2 or 3 years ago, that it was doing something like that accurately. But being able now to put all of the tools that our analysts use into an AI workflow and make those tools easier for them to use to do investigations has sped up a whole lot of things. And it's also lowered the bar for, writing arcane scene queries individually and taking, there's some cool work coming from, that was just released called Pocket Sift from Rob Lee, this over at SANS. And so Pocket Sift is an attempt at taking Sift Workstation, the tool that the operating system, that Linux distro I encouraged everybody to take a look at, instrumenting that with AI, right? So all of the tools within the Sift Workstation are sort of made available to an AI agent. So you're not individually typing volatility commands. You're not individually trying to get your sedgrep awks, correct for log analysis. So those AI-assisted workflows are, don't be sleeping on that. There's something to being savvy for what it's good at and what the limitations are currently. I would encourage people to just stay up to speed. It's not the bee's knees in all cases, right? But the folks that are staying on top of what's working, what's not working, where it's working well, I think those folks are going to do a lot better than people that just reject it outright or are blindsided by how powerful it could be.
That's great insights, Andrew. I think our listeners can't thank you enough for that type of detail. So my last question, I always like to wrap our interviews with kind of asking you to put on your prognosticator hat. Is there one thing you'd recommend to our listeners to really look out for, whether it be from the defensive side or from the threat actor side, over the next 6 to 18 months? And I know that's an eternity in cybersecurity, but is there something you see that people should really be paying attention to, aside from the AI?
Yeah, well, actually, I'll flip the coin on the AI because I have data. On Thursday Defensive, we sent out a bit of a poll on what people were most looking forward to keeping an eye on, right, over the next 12 to 18 months. Great. Kind of the same exact question. And I'm going with whatever they're saying because we'll use that collective knowledge. And it did turn out to be AI. So I'll flip the coin on AI a little bit. We talked about AI-assisted workflows on the defensive side. We are seeing interesting enterprise security risks with the, AI on the attacker side. And I expect this will come up or start increasing. The use of AI by the attackers is leading to some interesting situations. So we see some kind of run-of-the-mill, potentially unwanted malware, or potentially unwanted programs. Well, now those potentially unwanted programs are really squirrely AI tools that users are getting excited about. They're extolling extensions. Who knows where that data is going? They're playing with AI that they shouldn't be. You've got an enterprise security data loss risk there. We've already worked those cases of users just misusing AI. We talk about as people start plugging in AI workflows onto their computers, that's leading to some interesting behaviors. We've already seen AI accidentally delete the production database. I forget where that story came from, but giving access to basically an over-caffeinated intern into your enterprise environments is leading to some interesting risks. One of the things we think about is you've given AI access to sensitive private data. You've also given it access to a tool that communicates out to the internet. It can very easily get tricked into emailing it, right, to an attacker. So we see prompt injections and things like that getting pulled in already. We worked a case already where a non-technical user was running a really weird PowerShell on their computer. And we were like, what is this? Is this like, it was enumerating files. It was starting like, what caused this user to do this? Is this click fix? Are they getting tricked? Why is this person doing this? Yeah. Is this an incident? Is this even the user? Turned out they were on ChatGPT. They were getting really creative on trying to innovate, we'll say.
Okay.
And they were just going through AI instructions, recalculating on their computer as if they knew what was going on, running PowerShell commands, executing scripts that ChatGPT was giving it. So you talk about shadow IT. Right. Well, now you've got, right, your own users with some odd things that can happen. So anyway, there's some AI security risks that I'm really tracking. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great example. And there are a lot of people using AI unfettered, shall we say, where they're not technical enough to know what they're getting. That was one, I read an article the other day, just to kind of close out on this. I read an article the day that some AIs are actually being corrupted with bad answers to basically get people to do the wrong things, right? So there's some element to that too that's lurking out there. I don't know how wide that is, and I don't know how impactful that is, but I read that story and I was like, wow, that's an interesting thing you wouldn't think about, right? So, well, Andrew, first of all, thank you for taking the time to share your tremendous insights and joining us on the Endace Packet Forensic Files. We'd ask our listeners to tune in next time for another edition. For more information about Endace's network packet capture platform and our integrations with our Fusion technology partners, please go to endace.com. Andrew, again, thank you for taking the time. Really appreciate your insights. This was a tremendously useful conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks a lot, Michael.
All right.
This is great. Thanks for having me.